Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel Life with Lisette, and today's video we're going to talk a little bit about testimony and awakening and curating your life. At 48 years old, I was almost 49, I was laid off. Let me give you some backstory. So it was the morning of September the 12th. I had walked into the office like any normal day, and I sat down at my desk, reviewed my to-do list, looked at my meetings. All was fine. I had a one-on-one with my director, and 3 minutes before the meeting, he comes to my desk and says, "Oh, we have to change rooms. We're going to meet back here." And he pointed. So I said, fine. I grabbed my laptop, my notebook, and my planner, and we proceeded to go into the room. And in the room was the head of HR. There was our VP, and I remember just looking at him, and he turned around, he gave his back to the room and said, "I'm so sorry." And so that was the biggest day for me at that moment, and it turned my life on its head. It was a day that I will never ever forget for many reasons. I thought it was the day that I literally felt the life ripped from under me. I remember the emotions that I felt, the feeling, the losing, like the blood rushing from my head. I felt faint and shaky and nauseous, all the things. And that day I was told that I was going to be laid off, that my position had been outsourced. I had been with the company for 16 and a half years. My position was going to be outsourced, and my last day was going to be December 14th. And at 48, the first thing that I thought was, is this really happening? How are they're even hiring for people my age? I don't even know. It had been 16 and a half years since I had updated my resume, since I had been on an interview, and things had changed. Life had changed. The landscape had changed, and so it was scary. But I walked out of that day with my head up high, at least I thought, grabbed my things. I left without saying a word. I remember driving home and not feeling any type of emotional response. I couldn't cry. I think it was my body being in shock, honestly, and just trying to process it all. I got home, I called my husband, and thinking back on it, he helped me reflect and reminded me that things were just not okay, right? I had been complaining and I had been talking about all the changes that were happening at work, and just being in a really toxic environment, in a toxic department with people that really don't want to see you grow, don't want to help. And you feel as though spending 16 years in the same general department that you know these people, and you realize you don't. And so I went through the process of training my replacement for my outsourced agency, and I trained 4 people to do my job. It was one of the hardest, most challenging things I have ever had to do in my life, but I did it. I also knew that it was not a decision made based on my performance. It was a business decision. And I realized that, but it was hard. It was really hard, very challenging. They offered me a severance. And during that time, they gave me 3 months to try to find something internal. The company was in flux, and it just wasn't a good time for me to find something. I had several interviews, but again, the company was in flux, and I couldn't deal with the anxiety and the stress that that whole process was bringing on. I didn't want to be reactive. I didn't want to just take a job for the sake of taking a job, because the reality is my husband and I had sacrificed a lot 3 years prior, getting out of $60,000 of credit card debt. And if you guys want to see a video on that, let me know. But yes, we got out of $60,000 of credit card debt in 3 years. A lot of sacrifice. There were a lot of changes that had to be made, but we did it. And I made my last credit card payment that August. And I remember calling my husband, and he said, "Babe, we're going to be okay. We're okay. I'm glad this happened because you've been stressed. You have not been yourself for over a year. It's not the same company. It's good." I remember having to tell my daughters, and they cried with me. It was emotional. you invest 16 and a half years. I had sacrificed a lot. I had missed a lot of opportunities, missed a lot of moments, worked through holidays, couldn't really travel much during the holidays. And so it was challenging, but I do not regret any of that. What came after December 14th were the hardest days of my life. I just wasn't ready for them. And I would say around January, end of January, early February, I started to develop a lot of anxiety, heart palpitations. I had been put on monitors. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. I had a lot of inflammation, a lot of bloating. I gained a lot of weight. I started drinking every day. My husband and I were cigar smokers. I just took it to another level with the cigars and the alcohol. Just a bad, dark time. I was sad. I was lonely. I was scared. I was nervous. And although we were financially okay in terms of survival, it was still a big change. And I was 48. I just kept thinking, at this point now I'm 49, and it was nerve-wracking. So a friend of mine reached out to help out. He knew that I had been outsourced. My position had been outsourced. And so he asked me to come in for this interview. I did the interview, but that place was more toxic than the place I had just left. So that didn't work out. I left that job. And then in 2 months, I went to another company. Now, the problem for me was I had to go back in my career path to do a job that I hadn't done in about 8 or 9 years, but I felt like I needed something. I needed to get out of the house because what was happening to me inside of the house was my depression had reached an all-time high. I just didn't know I was depressed. I wasn't eating, and if I was eating the wrong things at the wrong time. I was sleeping most of the day, stayed in the dark. And during this time, I had also developed melasma, so that exacerbated my depression and my anxiety. I would not go to social gatherings. I did not want to go outside. I didn't want to be around people. And because I would get anxious and nervous, and it was just not a good scenario. And my way of coding that and protecting that was to drink alcohol to numb it. And it got to the point where I was drinking every day, multiple times a day, to the point where my family had to literally call an intervention between my husband and my daughters. And I had hit rock bottom. I had seriously hit rock bottom. I was not anything near the person that I thought I was. I didn't even know who I had become. I had no idea who I was. I would look in the mirror and it was someone I did not recognize. I gained a considerable amount of weight. I was just in a really bad place. And I remember one day the anxiety took over and I was home alone and I felt stuck, and I remember screaming at the top of my lungs because I started to listen to motivators, and I started to read a lot of personal development, and I was in that zone of just listening to podcasts on motivation and inspirational speakers. And it was Les Brown. I was listening to Les Brown on YouTube on this platform right here. And he said, he talked about if you fall down, make sure that you land on your back so that you can get up. It was a whole long, if you're familiar with Les Brown, you've heard this probably several times. But it was in the way he said it. It was the moment in which he said it, the moment in which I heard it loud and clear. And I was in my kitchen. I remember screaming, crying hysterically, and just sitting on the floor in my kitchen, crying what felt like for hours. I was by myself. And that was my pivotal moment. I had to release that. I had to let that all go. And then I quickly got up. I think for me, it felt like forever, but I got up and I felt so much lighter. I started a different job, and the job that I just mentioned where I had to go back in my career path, and I did that. And then the pandemic hit. And so we were forced to work remote, but our life at home had not changed, because see, what happened was when I hit that rock bottom, I decided to take a hold of my life. I told my kids, I'm not going to admit myself into any rehab or any kind of program. I know that I can do this on my own. And what I did was I started a health and fitness journey. I started it on November 10th. I remember being home alone, taking before pictures, something I had never done before. And when I look back on those pictures, you can see the depression, you can see the inflammation, you can see the sadness. You can see a whole different version of me. And it was blurry. I didn't even know how to take portraits of myself. The camera was too far. I had to zoom in. It was a mess. But I'm happy that I have that picture. And even though it's a little blurry, you can still see everything that I just explained to you. I started a health and fitness journey. I stopped smoking. I stopped smoking cigars. I stopped drinking cold turkey. And I told my family that if I can do this, if I can get through this change over the next 21 days, then I know that I'll be okay. I let my family know what I was going to do. They were on board and so, so, so supportive. They literally kept me alive. And I started my health and fitness journey. And it was in the hardest time of the year. It was during the holidays, but I knew that I had to get through it. And at the end, on that 22nd day, I was unrecognizable even to myself, but in a good way. It wasn't in a bad way this time. I saw a smile that I hadn't seen in a really long time. I saw light in my eyes. I felt my heart pump and be happy. I felt lightness. And although I still had stress and worry, I the anxiety has started to calm down. The depression had started to dissipate. Like it was just I would have my, my highs and lows, but the highs were less frequent and the lows were less frequent. So I was finding my medium. I was finding my middle. I stayed at this job during the pandemic, and in March of 2021, I had a one-on-one with my VP at the time, and he was going to review my bonus and my raise for the year. Now, mind you, the previous year was COVID. And it was such a moment because he sent it to me like a minute before we were supposed to meet. So as I'm opening the attachment, he is on Zoom. So he's on my screen, and as I'm opening the attachment, I see what my raise was, and it was 13 cents. And if that experience of being laid off and going through that hard work that I had put in, if anything, if that process didn't teach me anything, it taught me my worth. It taught me that I have a lot to bring to the table. I no longer thought low of myself. I no longer wanted to compromise. I no longer felt the need to make myself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. And in that moment, I had to exercise all of those lessons. And my father was speaking to me in my head. My father passed away 18 years ago. And I could hear his voice so clearly because he always told us, if you have nothing nice to say, you don't say anything at all. So I chose not to say anything. It was awkward, and we hung up the phone. 30 minutes later, I sent him an email and said, I'm taking the rest of the day PTO. And I didn't waste any time. I went right back to the room where I post a lot of my videos, and I went on my personal laptop and I started to look for work. I started to look for another position. And the position that I'm in right now is the position that became available, and I saw it. I reached out to a few people that I stayed in contact with. I reached out to them, and they told me, yes, I know who the hiring manager is. And it was at the old company. It was at the company that had laid me off, because I didn't get laid off due to my role or my performance. I got laid off because it was a business decision. It was a strategy decision. And so reaching out to those folks, from the moment that I reached out to them to the moment that I received the call that I was offered the position, it was 9 business days, which is a record history, by the way, in our company. And it is the role that I'm doing today. In the process of me losing my job, leaning into alcoholism, to help numb the pain, leaning into bad habits, eating habits, health habits that didn't serve me, doing all of that, and then being able to come out of that. During that period, though, during those dark periods, that's when I began my gratitude practice. That's when I began free writing in my journal. That's when I started my 5-year vision plan. I did a 5-year vision board, I did a 1-year vision board, and I did a 6-month vision board because I needed something to work towards. I needed something to give me hope. I needed something to help me see the end of this the light at the end of this dark tunnel, because it was dark and it was lonely and I was scared. And I'm so happy to sit here 6 years later from that day of December 14th of 2018, to sit here almost 3 weeks to the day and say, just about everything on my vision board that I had written, both personal and professional, have come true. They have come to pass. And I am so grateful and blessed and humbled by all of it. Not a day goes by that I don't write in my gratitude journal. Not a day goes by where I forget that feeling. Not a day goes by where I don't count my blessings. Because what stayed consistent in all of that was prayer. I prayed hard because that is, to me, you believe in what you want to believe in, and any higher power. For me, it's God. And I had to literally build that relationship. I started to read scripture every day. I started to really do a lot of heart work to get me to a different place, because I could not continue doing the same things that I was doing. I was going to get the same results. And so I put in a lot of work. It was not easy. I had a great support system. And here I am 6 years later in a position that I absolutely love, with a team that I had manifested, that I had claimed. Because when I wrote in my journal, when I wrote in my gratitude journal, and I wrote 10 things that I want to see for myself, 10 dreams that I had, I wrote them every single day. They vary day to day, depending on how I was feeling, but I made it a point to write 10 dreams that I had. And I am so happy to tell you that almost all of those dreams have come true, because I wrote them down as if they had already happened. I was speaking life back into myself because I knew what it felt like to not feel as though you want to wake up the next day. I knew what that was like. And so I sit here today with such a deep sense of gratitude, with such a deep sense of understanding and reflection. And I know that I have a bigger purpose. I know that I have a bigger meaning of existence here. And YouTube is allowing me to share all of this with you. I know so many people that have gone through changes in employment or otherwise, even in family. And the one lesson overall that I continue to write in my journal is that this didn't happen to me. That layoff, that depression, that brink of alcoholism, it all happened for me. Because as a result of me hitting rock bottom in all of those areas, that is my reference point. I had to go through that. I had to go through that process in order to come out on the other side. And so I'm here to give you hope. If you have experienced loss of work, loss of a friendship, you have to mourn them. I had to mourn my job. I identified with my role, just like I identified with my hair. It's 16 years of sacrifice and time and investment. And I now realize that my prayer was to be in a department where we were valued, where we were appreciated, where we had a team and good networking, good connection, where we supported each other, we believed and we trusted each other. And I wrote that in my journal. And that is true today. And it happened so effortlessly because I had already spoken it into existence. I had already claimed it. I had already manifested it. I had already prayed about it. And so for me, I wasn't surprised when it happened. And I'm going to wrap this up with this last confirmation of how God had his hands all over this. When I resigned from that job, the one that I had to go back about 8 years in my career, and I was doing work that I had done 8 years prior. When I submitted my resignation, my last day at that job was, let's say I'm just going to throw out a day here. Let's say it was April 1st. It wasn't until I walked out of that building, because it was still during the pandemic. I went there by myself. They opened the doors. They let me take my few personal things out. And I walked out the door and I go, why does this day feel so different? And my friends, it was the day, April 1st was my first day of employment at the job that I had started. And it's just funny to me because it was my first day at the company that had laid me off. That was my resignation date at that other company. So things happen for a reason, right? Things happen for us, not to us. So I want you to stay positive. I want you to put your chin up. I want you to journal. I want you to pray to whatever you pray to. I want you to center yourself and know your worth and know that what is for you will not pass you. And I'm living proof of that. I just wanted to come on here and share that story with you. I wanted to share with you how I was able to come out of it. What are some of the practices that I did to help me? And because I'm a very strong-minded person, I didn't have to go to any kind of rehab, but there are some that do need that. And so I encourage you to embrace that. If that's what you need, then I encourage you to embrace whatever mechanism and way it is for you to get the help that you need. I did go to therapy. I am still going to therapy because it's so beneficial. And I think anyone that's suffering from things should seek therapy of some kind. And I love it. I love to be able to open up and get these things off of my chest and out of my mind. But journaling also helps me. Working out 5 to 6 days a week is also my therapy of choice. So if you haven't done it and you want me to do a video on journaling or gratitude journaling, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for all of your support. Until the next one, adios.